My guest at this time is Gordon Chang. He's a policy expert on the Far East and the author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. He joins me today to discuss new evidence showing North Korea is not dismantling its ballistic missile program at all. In fact, it is actively building the program, according to a new report from the respected Center for Strategic and International Studies. And Gordon, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Well, here's CNN's Brian Todd with a quick summation of what this report shows.
New information tonight that Kim Jong Un is secretly operating a very dangerous web of hidden missile bases, even while he's been corresponding with President Trump, leading the president to declare the U.S. safe from North Korea's missiles.
The missiles have stopped. The rockets have stopped.
North Korea has stopped testing missiles since Trump and Kim began their dialogue. But tonight, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, has a new report saying Kim's regime is moving ahead with its missile program, operating more than a dozen secret missile sites that the regime has never acknowledged.
So, Gordon, we've talked about the signs that Kim Jong Un might well be trying to dupe us over the few months since the Singapore summit. How significant do you think this evidence is that's been revealed by CSIS?
I think most missile experts knew that these bases existed. Last year, we had all of these tests of mobile missiles. Well, they had to come from some facilities. So the existence of them should not be a surprise. And it's important, I think, that the U.S. intelligence community knew about these as well, though President Trump didn't talk about them. And I think that he should have, because he does have a duty of candor to the American people.
Is that why we haven't seen much of a response from the White House and the CIA, because this was already known for the most part?
Well, I think the CIA was, their job is not to respond. But there should have been something more from the White House. There was a statement from the State Department, and that was good. But the point is, we have to understand that the North Koreans are continuing development of their mobile missiles. And these are the missiles that we're really concerned about. Kim Jong Un, the North Korean leader, promised to dismantle his Sohae satellite launch station. And that, I suppose, is progress. But we were never concerned about that place because those missiles or those rockets take weeks to transport, assemble, fuel, and test. We can easily destroy them on the ground. It's the mobile missiles that can hide before launching that we're really concerned about.
And that was one of the things the CNN report also pointed out, is that this new facility that CSIS believes it has uncovered here is just 50 miles away from the DMZ, 80 miles away from Seoul, and they're concerned that by the time the U.S. could scramble and respond to actually seeing something through satellites or another way, that they could already be fired and put away before we could actually do anything about them. Is that a legit concern? It sounds like it is from what you just said.
Absolutely. We'd only have maybe about an hour's notice, and that should be sufficient time to destroy a mobile missile that is about to be launched. But in a wartime situation, we may not be able to do that. That particular facility that you referenced probably has a lot of short-range missiles that are aimed at the South Korean capital. And President Moon Jae-in of South Korea needs to acknowledge the importance of this. He's been trying to unify both South Korea and North Korea, and in the process, he has been beautifying Kim Jong Un. I think he needs to stop doing that, and he needs to be with the South Korean people about the threat that North Korea still poses to the South Korean state.
And there's been reports just in the last few days about posts at the DMZ being ripped out, trying to remove different signs of division. And you and I have talked before about how the South Korean president is very much interested in unification. So is this something that's likely to give him any pause at all?
I don't think so. The South Korean government said that there was nothing new in the CSIS report because they surely knew about this. But you're referring to something which is important, and that is the South Korean government has been, by agreement with North Korea and voluntarily, unilaterally, been taking down defenses against North Korea's infiltration and invasion plans. So this seems to me to be something that the South Korean people have got to be vitally interested in.
Gordon, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has made many trips to meet with the North Koreans to work out the terms of inspections to verify that they're, in fact, supposed to be dismantling their nuclear and missile programs. Obviously, we haven't seen a lot of progress towards that agreement. So at what point, given all the evidence that's piled up really in just was it 5 months now? At what point does Trump call Kim's bluff publicly?
It should have been long ago. President Trump at the Ottawa G7 said that he was going to give Kim Jong Un a one-time shot to do the right thing. And President Trump tried to create this friendly environment so that Kim would feel secure in disarming. Well, at this particular time, we've given Kim more than just one shot at this. So I think that our president needs to pivot. He needs to start imposing sanctions on the North Koreans, the Chinese, the Russians, and the South Koreans, because he's allowed sanctions busting to go on for much too long.
But on the campaign trail not too long ago, the president was talking about how Kim wrote him beautiful letters and they fell in love. And obviously that's hyperbolic, hopefully. But it suggests that Trump is personally invested in making sure that his personal overture to North Korea, doing what no president has done before, is successful. So how worried are you that because he does have that investment in North Korea turning out well, that he's reluctant to do what you just suggested that he do?
Well, I'm concerned as many others are. One thing we should remember, though, and that is last year, President Trump said wonderful things about Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, and actually tried to create a cooperative relationship with Beijing. That failed because Xi Jinping did not reciprocate. And so President Trump brought the hammer down on the Chinese this year. I think he could very well do the same thing to Kim Jong Un, especially if he feels that he's been embarrassed or humiliated by the North Korean leader. And at this point, I think we can say that there's an emperor has no clothes moment. And so President Trump does need to pivot to a much more severe, harsh policy.
Two-part question on China, since you mentioned Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader who's now made himself leader for life. What is China's role in North Korea's ongoing defiance and duplicity? And we're also seeing headlines that the Communist Party in China is really taking even more steps to take over the government there. So how does this all play together?
I think that Xi Jinping has been trying to support the North Koreans to the greatest extent possible. We've seen, both in recent months and in last year, open Chinese sanctions busting. And we know that all of these recent commodity transactions involving North Korea, someone had to be handling the money. There are a few Russian banks involved, but most of them are Chinese, which means that Xi Jinping has made a political decision to support Kim Jong Un, even if that violates sanctions, even if that violates U.S. federal law. And President Trump needs to impose the costs on Beijing as a way of sending a message to Kim Jong Un.
And what's your read on Xi Jinping and the Communist Party asserting more and more control over the government in China? We've
seen since the beginning of Xi Jinping's rule in late 2012 that the Communist Party has taken a much larger role in all phases of Chinese life. And this is going to continue because Xi believes that he should have absolute control over the Communist Party and that the party should have absolute control over society. This is not a welcome development, but nonetheless, this is the way Xi thinks.
Last question, Gordon. If President Trump does, in fact, do what you recommend and snap back the pressure sanctions that we had before the Singapore agreement, how is the world likely to respond? Will it be worse for Kim Jong Un or about the same as it was or maybe even not quite as bad?
I think that there is very little political will in other capitals to support the United States on sanctions. But the U.S. has got to show other countries that it's in their interest to do so. So this is a question not so much of Chinese sanctions busting or villainy in Moscow. This really is a question of political will in Washington. And President Trump should remember that the Iranians are watching this. And although, President Trump talks about sanctions on Iran, I'm sure that the Ayatollahs in Tehran are saying, well, look, the North Koreans are getting away scot-free. Why should we worry about what President Trump says? So there's a lot that rides on this, and not all of it relates to North Korea.
Gordon, we'll have to call time there. Thank you, sir, very much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gordon Chang, policy expert on the Far East, author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. He's also a columnist with the Daily Beast. I'm Greg Columbus, reporting for Radio America.